Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle Jobin, and you are listening to Time to Talk, a podcast for caregivers. This podcast is dedicated to helping family caregivers in Ontario. Through expert tips and resources, you will gain knowledge and validation for the ups and downs that come with caregiving. More importantly, you'll learn that you're not alone. It's so important to take this time for yourself. We're glad you're here. Today, we are joined by Susan Kendal. Susan is the founder of the blog Evolve Beyond Grief, where she blogs and starts dialogues through her social media about normalizing the conversations around death and grief. She became a widow at the age of 53, and since then has been on a mission to change the dialogue around death. She is a blogger for Hope for Widows and has lived experience being a caregiver. Susan, thank you so much for being with us here today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
I need this conversation, so I'm really looking forward to this conversation personally, and I know that a lot of our caregivers are going to relate with perhaps what we're chatting about today, and I really hope that they do. We wanted to create a space where Ontario caregivers could connect and share, and hopefully through our conversation today, we can all gain a little more insight into the special role and responsibility of a caregiver, as well as give caregivers resources for help. And we're going to start, of course, with your story and what you do. And we're going to dig a little deeper into a conversation about grief as well, and sort of normalize it, for lack of a better term for doing that. Susan, can you tell us, when did you first become a caregiver?
I first became a caregiver actually after my husband passed away. My father was going through chemo and radiation before my husband passed, and obviously after. So during that time, I had always been the one who took my dad for his treatments and to the doctors and fought with him over who would drive the car. He was a very stubborn man. I lived actually next door to him. We lived next door to him. So I would come to his aid, my mother's aid, more when he stumbled and fell. My mother was the full-time caregiver for him, but I certainly lived as a secondary one, watching him, worrying about him, making the appointments, doing all the things that I could do to assist my mom. And then once my father went into the hospital, we took turns basically living there. And because I don't need a lot of sleep, I guess I'm a bit of a control freak. I really wanted to be in the hospital by his side as much as possible, and also give my mother a break, because as most people should know, and hopefully everybody on this podcast knows, being a caregiver is emotionally and physically just the largest job I think anyone could ever do in their lifetime. Right. Pretty much after my father passed away, it became very clear to us that my brother was suffering with early onset Alzheimer's. And that began a 3-year journey of being his caregiver, again, not day to day in the home. We were lucky enough to have help with that, but for every other imaginable need possible, I was there for him day and night.
And of course, just to sort of round out and give our listeners a little bit more context, you mentioned before your husband passed, after your husband passed. So, and this is an important part of your story because it really is sort of the impetus behind the work that you do now. So can you clarify that for us?
My husband passed completely suddenly at the age of 54. It was a shock to all of us. And again, so we had been concentrating on my father, who was clearly the one that wasn't doing well before. And then shortly afterwards, my dad died about 2 years later. All focus then went on to my brother.
So you have a lot of caregiving experience.
I have a lot of caregiving experience. I've never done the physical caregiving that includes bathing and well, I did feeding, but mostly the personal hygiene. I've never had to do that, thankfully, because that's another level that just is unimaginable to me, that people are so kind and loving to do. But I probably have done most other things, including the financial and the medical and the appointments and everything else that's involved.
And you're giving us an idea of just how broad a spectrum of what happens as a caregiver, all the different facets of what a caregiver does.
Yeah, it's mind blowing.
There's so much there. How were each of your caregiving experiences different?
Well, it was different because my mother was very hands-on with my father. My father was in his late 80s. So, of course, he was a very strong man with his memory was intact until the end. Watching him, get weaker and weaker was horrendous, but I could accept it. Because of his age, it was the natural order of things. My brother was a completely other story. He finally died at the age of 64, 2 years ago. He skated hockey. He's a true Canadian. He was playing hockey until about 2 or 3 months before he died. And his journey, I woke me up to so much that people have to go through, even in terms of struggling within a family for, who's going to do what, and being there for the medical, being there for approving, what medication was going to continue, when we were going to take him off completely. Discussions. He had a son who, I think his sons ranged in age from 15 to 35 or something at the time. So there was a lot of conversation, and it had to obviously be very different for one child versus another. Running in and out of hospitals, he was one of the unlucky ones who became aggressive. So we had an aggressive early 60-year-old man who was physically fit from hockey and nowhere to put him. So I saw sides of our system that to this day still haunt me.
And we really appreciate you sharing your story. And we know that all of these things are difficult. And I'm so sorry for your losses in these cases. And that is a question that I wanted to talk about with you, because you touched so much on the subject of grief and loss. And this is a question that I probably should have thought of a little bit earlier. But how do you prepare yourself for loss when you're caregiving? Because in some cases, it is the inevitability. Not always, but sometimes.
Right. Well, I am now a certified grief educator. So I have my learned knowledge plus my experiential, I don't know, I have two sets of knowledge. And I know that I now understand that when you are a caregiver, particularly when you know there is no positive outlook except for accepting death, you are grieving. You have begun the grieving. It's called anticipatory grief. And I'm not sure everyone understands that caregivers are going through that grief cycle as they are emotionally and physically depleting themselves and giving to another with the greatest love humanly possible. So, how do you go through it? I think if you know or you assume that this person is going to die, it's really, really important that you accept that you are beginning the grief, because you are. And it's a long road. And usually as a caregiver, it's a lonely road. Oftentimes, what I found, even personally and even volunteering with the Ontario Caregiver Association, is that, family sort of, you take on the road, family's thrilled that somebody has taken on this role. And for most purposes, you are alone, except when people complain about everything that you've been doing. It's the craziest situation to be in. And your friends sort of forget about you because you're busy caregiving and not necessarily, you're grieving. So you're not really, even though you want to have a break and go out and be with friends, it's hard because you're constantly anxious and nervous, and your finger is next to the phone at every minute waiting for another call. That means you have to do something, and you're exhausted. And so I think the most important thing to tell somebody who's caregiving is be gentle with yourself. Just give yourself the love that you wish other people would give you. Take a bath, take a break. When I had a day off, oftentimes I realized that I spent the day just lying on my couch when I had the opportunity to do so, and either sleeping or watching television. So if your dishes pile up and if the snow piles up, it doesn't matter. It's time. This is well, it's not necessarily a short time because it can last for years, but it's really, you've got to take care of yourself. And if you don't take care of yourself, who's going to watch and take care of that person if you get sick? I really think that the key to caregiving is to speak out, find someone who will listen, who will just hold space for you, and be good to yourself. Don't be a hero.
The Ontario Caregiver Organization is dedicated to equipping caregivers with the resources they need to make sure they are not alone in their journey. Through our e-learning courses, you can learn on your own time and at your own pace. We provide e-learning courses for family caregivers, healthcare providers, volunteers, and employers. If you're new to caregiving, you can take a Caregiver 101 course to get you started. For more information, visit learning.ontariocaregiver.ca. That's learning.ontariocaregiver.ca. Now, back to our episode. Can you share with us your relationship with grief and how it has evolved over time? There's a lot here.
Yeah. Really involved.
I'd love to also know some of the lessons you have learned while experiencing grief. So we'll take this in two parts, I guess, but how has your relationship with grief evolved?
Grief for me used to be 24/7. It was this dark, heavy weight. Triggers were everywhere. Musical. I live in the same community as the people that I loved died and worked in. So I would see things that reminded me of them all the time. I would walk into a store, go grocery shopping, and, see something that somebody had loved, and I would break down crying. And I didn't like the triggers. They upset me and they scared me. And I was incredibly emotional and sad. Over time, and it's been, I have another brother who died in between this also, but the last person to die was 2 years ago, and my husband was 7 years ago. So we're talking about, a little bit now. And over that time, what's happened is I've learned to integrate grief into my life, meaning I know that I will always have grief inside of me. I know it, and that's okay, because that means I also have love. I was blessed to be loved and to have loved some amazing people in my lifetime. That's a blessing. But I also know that grief is a part of who I am. It's no longer going to be who I am. And so when there's triggers, I don't see them anymore as these horrible, scary moments. Of course, sometimes they sneak up on me and I start to cry, and that's going to happen probably forever. But often, like I was just telling someone, a Facebook memory comes up, and whereas I used to just, my whole heart would shake, now I appreciate those memories. They remind me of something that I may have forgotten, and I can look at them with, like you would a scrapbook of memories. It's something that happened, something I'm glad I'm reminded of, but it's no longer 100% who I am, that grief.
Do you think part of understanding grief and learning to live with it instead of sort of dominating your life is sort of accepting the fact that it's an inevitable part of the human experience? I think it's the thing is people don't want to acknowledge that it is essentially inevitable for all of us. And that's what makes it scary.
Definitely. Death is part of life, and grief is just you only grieve the people that you loved, really, or the people who were, you don't have to like someone to grieve for them, but they had to have been a key figure in your life or in a moment in your life. They just had to have some kind of key importance to you, or, even if it's that they abandoned you, but there's something in that person that gives you great emotion. And death is absolutely a part of life. And that's sort of my soapbox that we talk about. Bell Let's Talk Day is fabulous. The Canadian community has learned about mental health issues, how to talk to people who have mental health, most importantly, how to accept them. And we talk about, sexual orientation. We talk about so many issues. Even cancer used to be taboo to talk about. But we won't all have someone who we love who maybe personally affects us by whatever taboo we're talking about. Death is the one taboo we shall all face. And typically you grieve for 6 people, major people in your lifetime. Some people more, some people less, but it's typically about 6 people. So if we know that that is a part of life, then we have to learn about death. We have to write wills before we die. We have to teach our children and teach ourselves what to say, what not to say. And I believe that when you learn about death, it makes life more precious and more special. And it's not a negative thing. That's a positive thing. I look at every day now with so much joy for the small moments. I never did that before.
How do you hope to change the dialogue surrounding death? You've talked about the fact that there is this taboo surrounding death. So how do you hope to change that dialogue?
My biggest dream would be if we could have an insurance company take on death like Bell has taken on mental health. Because when someone you love dies, it affects you as though you were smoking 6 packages of cigarettes a day. Mentally, physically, emotionally, you are not well. And the chances of you dying after your spouse within 6 months is extremely high. They're even now suggesting that grief attributes to Alzheimer's. I mean, there's so many things that we're learning now. So an insurance company would take it on and help us educate. They do this in the UK all the time. Insurance companies are very involved with the education of death. But my goal is that people talk about it. And the way I want to do that is I offer free Zoom seminars to any group that wants to have a Q&A and ask me questions. I'm very open to answering. I just think that the more we talk about it, the more it will just become normalized in our society. And I know in my family, my little grandchildren talk about their dead grandfather as though that's a totally normal thing. They play in the cemetery like it's normal. And why isn't it normal?
Well, so my father passed away when my son was 6 months old.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Thank you. I appreciate that. But so when you said that, that just sort of rung a bell for me because, it's always been the fact in his life that his grandfather has passed away. So we've tried to create a dialogue around that with him that is age appropriate, of course, but to build an understanding of what has happened and who he was and that he was very loved by my father. So I can relate to a lot of that. Can I just touch on again some of the lessons that you feel that you've learned through experiencing grief? Anything else you wanted to say about that?
Well, the one thing I was just going to say specifically is if we learn how to respect and talk to people who are grieving, we would also learn how to talk and respect caregivers because they're grieving and we do not treat them properly. I don't understand what's going on in society, but they should be put on a pedestal, and they're not.
Both the people that do this on a voluntary basis and on a professional basis as well.
100%.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Are there any resources or coping techniques that you turn to through your experiences that you feel may work for others?
Well, grief is a very individual, it's very individual emotion. And you do really go through the stages, not necessarily from 1 to 2 to 3, thinking, okay, I've done 2, now when's 3 coming? They're cyclical and you go through them at different times. But if you're able to read books, I was not able to read. I can hardly even read still. I've lost that joy in my life that I used to have. I just can't concentrate. But many people do read a lot of books, and sometimes they'll go through 25 to find 3 that work for them. I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I find that's of great value. And it works with the second part of what I do, which is a lot of walking. I find walking and nature and my dog have been my major support. My family, of course, and my friends. But again, they don't know what to say after the first month. It took me about 6 years before I even spoke up and said, guys, I'm lonely. It's Saturday night and I don't have anyone like you do. I'm lonely. And that took a lot of courage for me, a lot of vulnerability. Didn't necessarily work so well, plus we had COVID. But I think exercise is huge, whatever that means for you. I started with yoga, and that was really wonderful. Some people like meditation a lot. There's so many. I actually did a widows group when I lost my husband, and just having the camaraderie of a few women who were, going through it like I was very helpful. There's an organization called Soaring Spirits, which is a widows group. It's an international group, and that was of value. There's tremendous amount of stuff on social media, also groups. And to me, that's actually a little bit of concerning, because on those groups, I find people who are grieving, whomever they're grieving, will say, I'm writing anonymously on this group because I don't have a friend or a family or a colleague who I can talk to anymore, because they believe the societal belief that, it's been 6 months or a year, or whatever the time frame you're allotted, and I'm not supposed to talk about it anymore. So those groups are fabulous because it gives people a place to talk. But again, that comes back to what I believe is if we could normalize death and grief, our loved ones would know how to help us and talk to us and hold our space.
Well, that may partially lead into my next question. Caring for different ages means providing different kinds of support. That's why the Ontario Caregiver Organization put together a toolkit to help caregivers give the right kind of support to the people they are caring for. Whether you're caring for children and youth or adults and seniors, this toolkit holds resources any caregiver can use. If you're new to caregiving, there is help for you as well. Caregivers across Ontario can equip themselves with everything they need, no matter who they are caring for. Visit ontariocaregiver.ca for more information. Now, back to our episode. Can you tell us about how you started Evolve Beyond Grief and what it was that made you want to create that website?
Evolve Beyond Grief originally I thought was going to be a widow site. And I really thought it would be a widow site to help widows move forward. And we would all, be this community of encouraging one another. But then I realized there are a tremendous amount of sites out there on social media that talk to people who are grieving. They talk one-on-one, coaches talk to people who are grieving. There's a lot of talk within the grief community. What again is missing is conversation outside of the grief community so that they better understand what people who are bereaved need. And so that's really what Evolve Beyond Grief became. It became a community for people who are grieving to talk and speak honestly about what they're going through. But my dream would be to move it past and outside of the grief realm and into, a social public conversation. Got a lot of ways to go.
I mean, you're definitely very much on the right track with everything that you're doing. We talked a lot about how people feel as caregivers and what your experience has been. Caregiving, it can be lonely, it can be an exhausting process where many people face challenges, maybe some resentment, some stigma during the grieving process.
Financial burden, huge.
That as well. Do you have any advice for someone who is just starting their grieving journey and navigating all of these emotions?
Starting it as a caregiver or actually starting it as someone who's...
Well, let's talk about both.
Well, as a caregiver, for sure, like I said before, you've got to give yourself some loving. You've got to, accept that you can't do everything. So you can't be caregiving 24/7 and doing your job and keeping your home clean and looking great. I mean, things have got to give. So you've got to give yourself some love. And if that means sitting in front of the TV with a candle burning and just not answering any calls or cleaning up, do that. Obviously, it would be great. And I say this knowing that it's impossible sometimes, but it'd be great if you could get proper sleep and exercise and eat properly. That would be wonderful. If you can reach out, if you are the main caregiver and you have siblings or other relatives who say, what can I do? Tell them, make meals for me. Tell them, can you I made a calendar and I put all my family on that calendar and asked people, these are the appointments. Can you take any of the appointments? Or can you come in between appointments and just be there so that when an appointment's finished, I can go home and breathe and not have to go directly back to my brother's home. I mean, reach out, ask people for help. They're not mind readers. They don't know what's involved in the day-to-day struggle because you're the one living it and they're not. And out of sight is really out of mind. So instead of complaining, demand. Tell people what you need. It's hard, but it needs to be done.
So what about somebody that is grieving the loss of someone, the death of someone that they love?
Well, understand that you're not going to get over it in a month or 6 months. It's not going to happen. It takes a long time to get over someone who you loved. And that grieving, again, will never go away but I promise you the horrible, horrible pain will smooth out a little bit. I promise it will. But don't, society, people used to die in homes and people saw them die. And it was a natural part of living. Children saw their grandparents die in the homes in front of them. Now it's out of sight, out of mind. And people assume that, oh, it's been a month, it's been 3 months, whatever it is. Why aren't you better? Don't listen. You're not better because you love someone and you are grieving on your own time schedule. I mean, if it's very severe, then reach out and get help, get proper help for it. But otherwise, talk to your friends, talk to your family. And if they say to you things like, oh, you shouldn't be talking about it anymore, say to them, yes, I should. Don't listen to the shoulds. You know what's best. And they don't, because they haven't been through it.
Well, let's hope everyone has a support network that they can turn to that doesn't give them that kind of feedback. I think absolutely. I mean, my last question would be, what about someone, for example, someone that might have children that is grieving and also helping someone else, or someone else that's close to them through their grief at the same time? If you find yourself for example, the loss of a spouse while you also have children, you're trying to help the children through the grieving process while grieving yourself. Is there any advice you might have for anyone in that situation?
For the person who's got the children and grieving, The other one.
The person that does have the children and is grieving.
For the person who has the children, I think it's the same thing when you're grieving. First of all, I think I may have made a mistake because I was trying so hard to not grieve in front of my kids that's not healthy. They need to see us grieve so they can learn how to grieve, because it's going, the natural order of things. Hopefully they'll be grieving for you one day. So obviously, you can't be screaming and just, you can't scare them. But I think it's really important that we're very honest with our children too. It's just like sex. You talk to them at their level, you answer the questions, and usually they ask a question and you're ready for a big, long answer. And in 3 words, they're like, okay. And they're off to something else. And that's it. It's over. But I think it's okay to be sad in front of them. And I think it's okay. I think it's absolutely mandatory that you talk and keep telling stories about whoever it is that you're grieving, because my brother-in-law died in a car accident 9 weeks after I got married, and I was 21. He was 18. My kids, who obviously were born after the fact, truly believed that they knew him and had met him because I had so many stories and memories that I always shared with them. And I think that's really important, because we can't tell our children that somebody went to sleep. They're going to think that they'll never shut their eyes because they're going to be so afraid to go to sleep. But if we tell them and we talk to them openly and honestly, and there's some wonderful books that you can read with your children, I think that's the best way to go. I also think there's nothing wrong with saying to a friend, you got to take them off of my hands. I need to grieve. I need to cry. I need, a good shower scream. And I don't think there's anything wrong with admitting that you need help. I think it's a big problem that we have, that we think that we're supposed to be, these brave heroes. We're not.
Susan, we really appreciate you being on the show today and sharing your perspective. And I'm so appreciative of the work that you're doing to change the conversation around grief. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was so nice to meet you.
Same. Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode. You can access more details about support services on our website, ontariocaregiver.ca. Until next time, I'm Michelle Jobin, and you have been listening to Time to Talk, a podcast for caregivers. We hope you have a wonderful day.